The colony ship Wandering Hope drifted through the purple clouds of the Orvani Nebula when the first warning sirens began to scream. Commander Ethan Cole rushed to the bridge, his boots pounding against the metal floor. The main view screen showed 3 massive vessels emerging from the swirling cosmic dust, their hulls black as midnight and covered in strange symbols that glowed with blue light. "Unknown ships approaching," reported Lieutenant Maria Santos from her station. "They're not responding to our hails." Ethan gripped the armrest of his command chair. The Wandering Hope was a peaceful exploration vessel. It carried scientists, engineers, and families hoping to establish a new colony on a distant world. They had no weapons capable of fighting whatever those ships were. "Keep trying to make contact," Ethan ordered. "All frequencies." Navigator Kyle Bennett turned from his console with fear in his eyes. "Commander, I'm picking up energy signatures. They're charging weapons." Before Ethan could respond, a blinding beam of light struck the Wandering Hope. The ship shuddered violently, and several crew members were thrown from their seats. But the beam did not destroy them. Instead, it wrapped around the ship like a net, holding it in place. "We're caught in some kind of tractor beam," Maria said. "Engines are useless." The largest of the 3 ships moved closer until it filled the entire view screen. A section of its hull opened and dozens of smaller craft poured out like insects from a hive. They surrounded the Wandering Hope within seconds. A voice crackled through the communication system. It spoke in perfect English, though it sounded like metal scraping against glass. "Human vessel. You have violated the protected space of the Galactic Tribunal. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in immediate destruction." Ethan looked at his crew. He saw parents thinking of their children in the lower decks. He saw scientists who had given up everything on Earth to explore the stars. He saw fear, confusion, and helplessness. "Stand down," he said quietly. "Nobody does anything stupid." The boarding party arrived within minutes. They were Velcari, a species Ethan had only read about in the brief first contact files provided by Earth's space agency. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with bodies covered in blue crystalline plates that served as both skin and armor. Their eyes were solid black orbs that reflected no light. 20 Velcari soldiers marched through the corridors of the Wandering Hope, their weapons raised. The crew offered no resistance. What could they do against creatures that looked like they were carved from living gemstone? The soldiers parted, and a new figure stepped forward. This one was different from the Velcari. It stood on 6 legs like an insect, with a body covered in dark brown chitin. Its head featured 2 large compound eyes, and a set of mandibles that clicked constantly. It wore flowing robes of gold and silver, marking it as someone important. "I am High Arbiter Zinthal of the Galactic Tribunal," the creature announced. "Who commands this vessel?" Ethan stepped forward. "I do. Commander Ethan Cole." Zinthal's compound eyes studied him with alien curiosity. "You have entered the Orvani Nebula without authorization. This sector is protected under the founding protocols established 17,000 cycles ago. The penalty for unauthorized entry is death," Maria gasped. Kyle stumbled backward. The crew erupted in frightened whispers. "There must be some mistake," Ethan said, keeping his voice calm. "We're explorers. We had no idea this space was restricted. There were no warnings, no beacons, nothing on our sensors." "Ignorance of the law provides no excuse," Zinthal replied. "The Tribunal does not negotiate. The Tribunal does not forgive. You will stand trial for your crime, and you will face the consequences. All of us. There are over 200 people on this ship. Families, children." Zinthal tilted his head in a gesture that might have been surprise. "Children. Your species brings offspring on vessels of exploration. We're starting a new colony. This is our home." The High Arbiter considered this for a moment. His mandibles clicked in what Ethan was beginning to recognize as a sign of thought. "The Tribunal requires only 1 representative to stand trial," Zinthal finally said. "You are the commander. You bear responsibility. You alone will face judgment." Ethan felt relief and terror in equal measure. His crew would be safe, at least for now. But he would face this alien court alone. "I accept," he said. Maria grabbed his arm. "Commander, you can't. They'll kill you. If I don't go, they might kill everyone." He gently removed her hand. "Take care of the ship, Lieutenant. Take care of the crew. Find a way to contact Earth and let them know what happened." The Velkari soldiers surrounded Ethan and led him toward the airlock. He walked with his head held high, refusing to show the fear that churned in his stomach. The last thing he saw before the airlock closed was Maria's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. The transport shuttle carried him across the void to the largest of the 3 ships. Inside, he was placed in a holding cell, a small room with walls that seemed to shift and move like liquid metal. There was no bed, no chair, nothing but empty space. Hours passed, or maybe days. Ethan had no way to tell. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, thinking about everything that had led him to this moment. He thought about growing up in a small town in Colorado, looking up at the stars and dreaming of touching them. He thought about his years in the space program, working his way up from pilot to commander. He thought about the day he was chosen to lead the Wandering Hope on humanity's most ambitious mission yet, and now he sat in an alien prison, waiting to die for a crime he did not know he was committing. The cell door opened and a small creature entered. It stood only 3 feet tall, covered in soft gray feathers that ruffled with every movement. It had large round eyes that blinked rapidly and a small beak that clicked when it spoke. "Greetings, human. I am Piptal. I have been assigned as your legal advisor." Ethan looked at the creature with weary eyes. "Legal advisor? I thought the Tribunal didn't negotiate." "They do not. But every accused being is entitled to understand the charges against them and the process they will face. It is one of the few mercies the founding protocols allow." "Some mercy." Waddled closer, its feathers rustling. "You are the first human to face the Tribunal. Your species is not well known to us. You achieved faster-than-light travel only 30% of your years ago, yes? You are considered primitives by galactic standards, primitives who cross the galaxy."
"Oh, indeed."
"That is what makes you interesting." Piptal produced a small holographic tablet and began taking notes. "Tell me about your world." "Earth, I believe it is called." Ethan shrugged. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. The Tribunal has classified it as a Category 5 Deathworld, the most dangerous classification possible. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, toxic atmosphere, dangerous wildlife, tectonic instability, electromagnetic storms. By all calculations, life should not exist there. Yet your species not only survives, but thrives." Ethan felt a strange pride stir in his chest. "We call it home." Piptal's feathers ruffled with what might have been amazement. "Remarkable. Truly remarkable. The Tribunal will be most interested to learn about your kind, right before they execute me." The small alien paused, and something like sadness crossed its features. "Yes, right before that. I am sorry, human." "Wait. Well, we where with the well we will way I will well we the war we were we were we the But perhaps your death will teach the galaxy something about your species. Perhaps it will not be entirely in vain." Ethan closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the wall. He was going to die in an alien courtroom, light years from home, for a crime he never meant to commit. But deep inside, a small flame of defiance still burned. He was human. His ancestors had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have wiped them out. They'd crawled out of caves and reached for the stars he was not going to give up without a fight. The transport shuttle descended through layers of clouds and artificial atmosphere until Judgment Station came into view. Ethan pressed his face against the small window, his breath catching in his throat. The station was enormous, larger than anything humans had ever built. It hung in the void like a metal flower, with petals of steel and glass spreading out in every direction. Ships of every shape and size docked along its edges, bringing beings from across the galaxy to witness the famous justice of the Tribunal. The shuttle landed in a hangar, filled with strange sounds and stranger smells. Valkyrie soldiers escorted Ethan through winding corridors that seemed to stretch forever. He passed beings he could never have imagined. Creatures made of living fire walked beside beings that looked like floating jellyfish. Tall, thin figures with skin like bark nodded at short, round creatures covered in golden fur. The galaxy was more diverse and more strange than any human had ever dreamed. They brought him to a preparation chamber where he was given simple gray clothing to wear. A medical drone scanned his body and declared him fit for trial. Then Piptal arrived, feathers ruffled with nervous energy. "The grand chamber's nearly full," the small alien reported. "Word has spread about the human trial. Many species wish to see your kind for the first time." "Glad I could provide entertainment," Ethan said bitterly. "You do not understand. This is unprecedented. No human has ever stood before the Tribunal. Some species have traveled for weeks to witness this moment. You are about to become the most famous human in galactic history. And the most dead." Till eyes blinked rapidly. "I have been studying the founding protocols. There may be options available to you. The law is ancient and complex. Many of its provisions have not been used in thousands of cycles." Ethan looked at the small creature with sudden interest. "What kind of options?" "I cannot say more. The guards might be listening, but pay attention during the proceedings. Listen carefully to everything the arbiters say. And remember that the law was written long before your species existed. It may contain provisions that were never meant for beings like you." Before Ethan could ask more questions, the guards returned. They led him through a massive doorway and into the grand chamber of the Galactic Tribunal. The chamber took his breath away. It was a vast dome nearly a kilometer across, with seats rising in tiers all the way to the distant ceiling. Thousands of beings filled those seats, representing hundreds of species. Some sat in special containers filled with liquid or gas. Others floated in the air or clung to the walls. All of them turned their various eyes and sensors toward the small human walking to the central platform. Ethan climbed the stairs to a raised circle in the middle of the chamber. Energy restraints hummed around his wrists, binding his hands together. Above him, 7 floating thrones arranged in a crescent held the high arbiters of the Tribunal. Zinthal sat in the center, his compound eyes fixed on the human below. To his left sat a being that appeared to be made entirely of green gas, contained within a mechanical suit. To his right was a creature like a living plant, with leaves instead of hair and bark instead of skin. The other 4 arbiters were equally strange, representing species Ethan could not begin to identify. "The Tribunal is now in session," Zinthal announced, his voice amplified to fill the chamber. "The accused designation, Ethan Cole, of the species known as human, stands charged with unauthorized transit through protected space. The evidence is clear. The human vessel entered the Orvani Nebula without permission. The penalty, as established by the founding protocols, is death." A ripple of sound passed through the audience. Ethan heard clicks, whistles, and sounds his human ears could not properly process. He was being discussed, analyzed, and judged by beings who saw him as nothing more than a primitive intruder. "The accused may speak in his defense," Zinthal continued. Ethan took a deep breath. He remembered Piptal's words about listening carefully and paying attention to the law. He needed to buy time to find any crack in this ancient system that might save his life. "High Arbiters, members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I do not deny that my ship entered the Orvani Nebula. But I ask this tribunal to consider the circumstances. My species is new to interstellar travel. We have not been provided with complete star charts. The beacon marking the nebula as restricted was broadcasting on a frequency our sensors could not detect. The gaseous arbiter, whose name, Ethan later learned, was Volshan, spoke in a voice like wind through empty pipes. You claim ignorance of the warning systems? I claim that the warning systems were designed thousands of years before humans achieved space travel. They were not calibrated for our technology. We had no way of knowing the space was restricted. Whispers spread through the audience. Some species seemed surprised by this argument. Others dismissed it with gestures of contempt. Zinthal's mandibles clicked impatiently. The founding protocols make no allowances for technological incompatibility. The law is absolute. Ignorance provides no excuse. Ethan nodded slowly. He had expected this response. The tribunal was not interested in fairness or mercy. They cared only about the rigid application of ancient rules. But Piptal had said the law was complex. There had to be something he could use. I understand and accept the judgment of the tribunal, Ethan said. However, before sentence is carried out, I wish to invoke an ancient right. The chamber fell silent. Even the arbiter seemed caught off guard. What right do you invoke, human? Zinthal asked. Article 7, Section 3 of the Founding Protocols. The right of trial by environment. For a long moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. The audience exploded in a frenzy of noise and movement. The arbiters turned to each other, their private communications filling the air with encrypted signals. Keshmira. The plant-like arbiter spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. You invoke the ancient right. This has not been requested in 600 cycles. How does a primitive species even know of its existence? I was provided with a copy of the founding protocols, Ethan replied. I read them. All of them. Impossible, Volshan said. The protocols fill thousands of volumes. No being could read them all in the time since your arrest. Humans learn quickly when our lives depend on it. Zinthal raised one of his many limbs, calling for silence. The chamber slowly settled. The right of trial by environment exists within the founding protocols, the High Arbiter admitted. It cannot be denied. Explain for the assembly what you are requesting. Ethan turned to face the audience, addressing not just the arbiters but the entire galaxy. Section 3. Any accused being may request that their fate be determined by survival. The tribunal selects a world of their choosing. If the accused survives for 10 standard rotations on that world without assistance, all charges are dismissed. If the accused dies, justice is considered served. It is a death sentence by another name, Keshmira observed. The tribunal always selects the most dangerous worlds available. No one has ever survived. That is my right to accept, Ethan replied. I would rather face the wilderness than face execution. The arbiters conferred for several minutes. Finally, Zinthal turned back to the human.
Oh, very well.
The tribunal grants your request. You will be transported to a world of our choosing. If you survive 10 standard rotations, your charges will be dismissed. If you perish, justice is served. I accept, Ethan said. Then we shall select an appropriate world. Zinthal gestured, and a holographic map of the galaxy appeared above the chamber. Thousands of worlds spun in the projection, each one marked with danger classifications. For crimes against protected space, only the most dangerous environments are suitable, the High Arbiter declared. We select a Category 5 Deathworld, the most hostile classification known to the Galactic Council. The map zoomed in on a small blue and green planet, orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The tribunal selects Earth, Zinthal announced. The human homeworld. You will be sentenced to survive on your own planet. The gallery erupted in shocked sounds. Every species knew of Earth's classification. It was a world of extremes, of deadly creatures and hostile environments. No alien had ever survived more than a few hours on its surface. But Ethan Cole smiled. They were sending him home. The transport vessel shook violently as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Warning lights flashed across every console, and the alien crew scrambled to keep the ship from tearing itself apart. The pilot, a serpentine creature called a Sylvan, wrapped its coils tightly around the control column as the ship bucked and rolled. Atmospheric turbulence exceeding all safety limits. The pilot hissed, its forked tongue flicking with terror. The planet is trying to destroy us. Ethan sat calmly in his seat, watching the chaos with quiet amusement. It's just a storm. We have them all the time. Electromagnetic interference is disrupting our navigation systems. Temperature fluctuations are destabilizing the hull. The air itself contains corrosive levels of oxygen. The pilot's scales had turned pale with fear. How does anything survive on this world? You get used to it. The transport broke through the clouds, and suddenly, the shaking stopped. Below them spread an endless carpet of green forests, broken by rivers that sparkled silver in the afternoon sun. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still white with snow despite the warmth of summer. It was the Pacific Northwest, one of the most beautiful regions on Earth. To Ethan, it looked like heaven. To the alien crew, it looked like certain death. The ship landed in a clearing between towering pine trees. The engines powered down, and an uneasy silence filled the cabin. Through the viewports, the crew could see grass swaying in the wind, birds circling overhead, and shadows moving in the forest. The environment is hostile on every level, the pilot reported, reading from a scanner. Gravity is 10% higher than galactic standard. Temperature varies by 40 degrees between sun and shade. The air contains particulates that could damage respiratory systems. Local fauna detected in the surrounding area. Some are large enough to pose significant threat. Ethan stood and stretched his arms above his head. Sounds like a nice day. A small drone detached from the wall and floated beside him. It was equipped with cameras that would broadcast his survival attempt to the entire galaxy. Trillions of beings would watch as the human faced his supposed death sentence. Recording has begun, the drone announced in a flat, mechanical voice. Subject must survive 10 standard rotations without assistance. Current threat assessment: extreme. Probability of survival: less than 3%.
Thanks for the vote of confidence.
The transport's hatch opened with a hiss, and Ethan stepped out onto Earth. The first thing he noticed was the smell. After weeks of breathing the recycled air of alien ships and stations, the fresh scent of pine and earth was overwhelming. He breathed deeply, filling his lungs with air that carried hints of flowers, rain, and the clean bite of mountain streams. It was the smell of home. The second thing he noticed was the sound. Birds sang in the canopy above. Insects hummed in the undergrowth. A distant stream bubbled over rocks. The forest was alive with noise, a constant symphony that most aliens would find terrifying, but that Ethan found deeply comforting. He walked into the trees without looking back. The transport lifted off behind him, retreating to orbit where it would monitor his progress from a safe distance. The drone followed silently, recording everything. Within an hour, Ethan had found a small stream running through a rocky bed. He knelt at the water's edge and cupped some in his hands. It was cold and clear, fresh from snowmelt, higher in the mountains. He drank deeply, the water cooling his throat and settling his stomach. On Judgment Station, where the broadcast was being shown on massive screens, the audience gasped in horror. The human consumes untreated water directly from the environment, Piptal narrated for the viewers. Water from natural sources on Deathworlds typically contains parasites, bacteria, and toxic minerals. This should kill him within hours. But Ethan did not die. He continued walking, following the stream as it wound through the forest. He identified plants he recognized from his childhood camping trips. Wild berries grew along the path, and he ate several, savoring their sweet and slightly tart flavor. The subject now consumes plant matter, the drone reported. Local vegetation may contain toxic compounds. Ethan ignored it. He knew which berries were safe and which to avoid. Every human child learned these things. At least the ones who grew up in places like Colorado where the wilderness was always close. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan started building a shelter. He found a natural overhang of rock that would protect him from rain and wind. He gathered branches and leaves, weaving them together to create walls that would trap his body heat during the cold. Mountain night, the temperature dropped quickly after sunset. Within an hour, it had fallen 20 degrees. The aliens watching from orbit transmitted urgent warnings about the dangerous temperature fluctuation. Ethan responded by building a fire. He gathered dry wood and kindling, arranging them in a small pile beneath the overhang. Using a technique he had learned as a boy, he created friction between two sticks until a tiny ember glowed in the darkness. He coaxed the ember into flame, feeding it carefully until a cheerful fire crackled before him. The drone zoomed in on the flames, transmitting the image across the galaxy. The subject has ignited a controlled chemical reaction, it reported. Temperature at the combustion point exceeds 400 degrees. The human sits less than 1 meter from open flame without protective equipment. Ethan stretched his hands toward the fire, warming them against the chill. He had done this hundreds of times in his life, on camping trips with his father, on training exercises with the space program, on lonely nights when he needed to remember what it felt like to be truly alone with nature. Across the galaxy, beings watched in disbelief. Fire was one of the most dangerous forces known to most species. It destroyed, it consumed, it killed. Yet this human had created it deliberately and now sat beside it as casually as if it were a pet. "Impossible," whispered a Valkyrie commander, watching from his warship. "They domesticate fire." The first night passed without incident. Ethan slept fitfully, waking every few hours to add wood to the fire. When dawn broke, he felt refreshed and ready to continue. Day 2 brought new challenges. As he explored his surroundings, he encountered a steep cliff that blocked his path. Rather than turn back, he climbed it. His hands found holds in the rock, and his feet pushed against tiny ledges. Within 20 minutes, he had scaled a cliff that would have required specialized equipment for most species. "The subject demonstrates remarkable physical capability," the drone noted. "Climbing ability, grip strength, and balance all exceed projected parameters." Ethan laughed. He was not an exceptional climber by human standards. Any reasonably fit person could have made that climb. But to the aliens watching, he might as well have been flying. On day 3, he encountered his first large animal. The black bear emerged from the bushes without warning. Attracted by the smell of the fish Ethan had caught for breakfast, it was a young male, curious but not aggressive. Still, it weighed nearly 200 kilograms and had claws that could tear through steel. The drone transmitted urgent alerts. Megafauna detected. Threat level critical. Subject should flee immediately. Ethan did not flee. Instead, he stood up slowly, making himself look as large as possible. He raised his arms above his head and spoke in a loud, firm voice. "Hey there, big guy. This is my camp. You need to move along." The bear stopped, tilting its head at the strange creature that was not running away. Most animals fled from bears. This one was standing its ground and making noise. Ethan picked up a stick and banged it against a rock, creating a loud clanging sound. "Go on, get out of here." The bear decided this encounter was not worth the trouble. It turned and lumbered away, disappearing into the forest. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. "The human has intimidated an apex predator," Pipto reported, his feathers standing straight up with amazement. "It used psychological tactics rather than weapons." The bear retreated without violence. Ethan sat back down and returned to eating his fish. The drone hovered nearby, recording every bite. "Your planet terrifies me," it said, breaking its usual neutral tone. "And you treat it like a playground." Ethan looked up at the drone with a slight smile. "This is not a death world," he said. "This is just Earth. This is where we became who we are." By the 5th day, every corner of the galaxy knew about the human surviving on his death world. The broadcast had become the most watched event in recorded history, surpassing even the great peace treaties and the coronations of emperors. Trillions of beings from thousands of species tuned in every hour to watch the strange creature from Earth navigate an environment that should have killed him 100 times over. On the Valkyrie homeworld, military commanders gathered in their war rooms to analyze the footage. They watched Ethan climb mountains without equipment, They watched him swim across rivers filled with creatures that could have torn him apart. They watched him eat foods that would have poisoned any Valkyrie in seconds. "If one human can do this," said Fleet Commander Kazrith, his crystalline plates clicking with concern, "what happens when we encounter them in large numbers? What happens when we face their armies?" "They have no armies," replied his advisor. "Humans have been exploring space for only 30 years. They are primitives. Primitives who conquer their environment with bare hands. Primitives who face death with smiles on their faces. Do not underestimate them." On the agricultural world of Grendel, farming communities gathered around their communal screens to watch the evening broadcast. They saw Ethan dig roots from the ground and cook them over his fire. They saw him collect water from morning dew on leaves. They saw him build tools from stone and wood, just as his ancestors had done for millions of years. "He wastes nothing," observed Elder Tamriel, her bark-like skin creaking as she leaned forward. "Everything the planet gives him, he uses. He works with the land, not against it." "But the land is trying to kill him," said a younger member of the community. "The temperature, the creatures, the water, everything is hostile, is it? Or has he simply learned to live within the danger? Perhaps his Deathworld is not an enemy to be feared, but a teacher to be respected." On the scientific station of Axiom Prime, researchers worked around the clock to analyze every frame of the broadcast. They measured Ethan's reaction times, his decision-making patterns, his physical capabilities. The data they collected was unlike anything in their records. "His muscle density is remarkable," reported Dr. Vexalia, a four-armed scientist whose species specialized in biological research. "His cardiovascular system can sustain activity for hours without rest. His sensory organs can detect subtle changes in environment that most species would miss entirely. But it is his mind that fascinates me most," added her colleague, a floating sphere of pure energy named Axiom 7. "He does not panic. He does not freeze when facing danger. His brain processes threats and generates responses within milliseconds. Evolution on his Deathworld has produced a creature optimized for survival. And for war," Vexalia said quietly. "Do not forget that humans have a long history of conflict among themselves. They have been fighting and surviving for their entire existence as a species." The broadcast showed Ethan facing new challenges every day. On day 6, a thunderstorm rolled through the mountains, bringing lightning, wind, and torrential rain. Most species would have sought shelter and waited for the danger to pass. Ethan simply wrapped himself in the animal hides he had prepared and kept walking. "The human continues moving despite electromagnetic storm activity," the drone reported. "Lightning strikes detected within 500 meters. Subject shows no signs of distress." Ethan actually laughed as thunder rolled across the sky. He had always loved thunderstorms. There was something primal and exciting about watching nature display its power. As a child, he had stood on his porch during storms, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder to see how close the strikes were. On day 7, something unexpected happened. Ethan was following a hiking trail when he encountered another human. A young woman emerged from the tree line, carrying a large backpack and using hiking poles to navigate the rough terrain. She had brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and wore practical outdoor clothing. "Hey there," she called out, raising one hand in greeting. "You okay? You look like you've been out here a while." Ethan froze for a moment, suddenly aware of how he must look. His clothes were torn and dirty. His face was covered in scruff. He had been living in the wilderness for a week, eating whatever he could find and sleeping under the stars. "I'm fine," he said. "Just doing some extended camping." The woman, whose name was Grace Murphy, looked at him with friendly concern. "Pretty remote area for solo camping. You sure you don't need anything?" "I've got extra supplies." "No, really, I'm good." "Thanks, though." Grace shrugged. "Well, there's a ranger station about 5 miles east if you need help. Trail's pretty well marked. Take care of yourself." She continued on her way, disappearing down the path with a casual wave. The drone had recorded everything. Across the galaxy, viewers watched the interaction with growing amazement. Here was another human, wandering through the same deadly environment with nothing more than a bag on her back. She had shown no fear, no concern. no awareness that she was walking through one of the most dangerous places in the known universe. "There are more of them," whispered a Sylvan diplomat watching from his embassy. "They all walk through death as if it means nothing." On Judgment Station, the High Arbiters convened an emergency session. This was supposed to be an execution, Volshan said, his gaseous form swirling with agitation. "The trial by environment has always resulted in death. That is its purpose." "The human does not merely survive," observed Keshmira, her leaves rustling with what might have been admiration. "He thrives. He improves. Each day he grows stronger, more confident, more adapted to his environment." Zinthal watched the broadcast in silence. On screen, Ethan was building a new shelter, this one more elaborate than his first. He had developed a routine, a system for living in the wilderness that seemed almost comfortable. "We chose their homeworld as punishment," Zinthal finally said. "We thought it would be poetic justice to kill him with his own planet. Instead, we have given him every advantage." "Should we intervene?" asked another arbiter. "We could introduce additional challenges, predators, poisons, environmental hazards. Now, the founding protocols are clear. Once trial by environment begins, no interference is permitted. We can only watch." Zinthal's mandibles clicked slowly. "We can only learn." Day 8 brought viewers something new. Ethan discovered a waterfall cascading into a deep pool, and without hesitation, he stripped off his clothes and dove in. He swam in water cold enough to stop the hearts of most species, laughing as the waterfall pounded against his back. "The human engages in recreational activity," the drone reported, seemingly confused. "Despite ongoing survival situation, subject chooses to waste energy on non-essential behavior." But Ethan was not wasting energy. He was doing something fundamentally human. He was enjoying himself. He was taking pleasure in the beauty of his world, in the simple joy of cold water on tired muscles. He was reminding himself why life was worth fighting for. On day 9, the broadcast reached a new milestone. It had now been viewed by more beings than any other event in galactic history. Governments were issuing official statements about humans. Trade routes were being planned toward Earth, diplomatic. Missions were being proposed. A species that had been considered primitive and insignificant just weeks ago was now the most talked about. Civilization in the galaxy. And all because one man had been sentenced to death on his own planet and refused to die. Ethan did not know any of this. He only knew that he had one day left. One more day of sleeping under stars, of drinking from streams, of walking through forests that his ancestors had walked for hundreds of thousands of years. One more day of being exactly where he belonged. On the morning of the 10th day, Ethan Cole woke with the sunrise. Light filtered through the trees, painting the forest floor in shades of gold and green. Birds sang their dawn chorus, and somewhere in the distance, a stream murmured over rocks. It was a perfect morning, the kind he had dreamed about during long months aboard the Wandering Hope. He stood and stretched, feeling the pleasant ache in muscles that had worked hard for 10 days. His body was tired, but strong, tempered by the challenges he had faced. He had lost weight, gained calluses, and grown a full beard that made him look like a man who belonged in the wild. The drone hovered nearby, its camera fixed on him as always. Day 10 commencing, it announced. Survival period will conclude at sunset. Subject must return to designated landing site to complete trial by environment. Ethan nodded and began walking. The landing site was several miles away, back through terrain he had explored over the past week and a half. He took his time, savoring every step. Who knew when he would see Earth again? Who knew what waited for him back in the stars? As he walked, he thought about everything that had happened. He thought about his crew, still waiting aboard the Wandering Hope. He thought about Maria Santos, who had cried when they took him away. He thought about Kyle Bennett, who had looked so scared but tried so hard to be brave. He thought about his family back on Earth, who probably had no idea what had happened to him. His mother, who had begged him not to go into space. His father, who had smiled with pride when Ethan told him about the mission. His sister, who had promised to name her first child after him if he made it back safely. He was going to make it back. Against all odds, against the expectations of an entire galaxy. He was going to survive. The landing site came into view just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The transport vessel had already arrived, sitting in the clearing like a metal insect waiting for its passenger. Valkyrie soldiers stood guard around it, their crystalline bodies reflecting the golden afternoon light, and standing at the base of the ship's ramp was High Arbiter Zinthal himself. Ethan stopped at the edge of the clearing, surprised. He had not expected to see the leader of the Tribunal here on Earth. Surely, there were more important matters for someone of his position to attend to. Ethan said, "I did." Zinthal's compound eyes fixed on the human with an unreadable expression. "I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to understand." "Understand what? How you survived? How you walked through an environment that should have killed you 1,000 times over? How you faced predators and storms and cold and hunger without breaking?" The High Arbiter's mandibles clicked slowly. "How you made it look easy?" Ethan walked forward until he stood before the massive insectoid creature. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "It was not easy," Ethan finally said. "Every day was hard. Every moment required focus, effort, determination. But that is what it means to be human. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We face whatever the universe throws at us, and we find a way to keep going." "Your species evolved on this death world," Zinthal observed. "Millions of years of natural selection, breeding generation after generation for survival. You were not designed for comfort or safety. You were designed for challenge. We're designed to adapt, to learn, to overcome. Our planet did not make us soft. It made us strong." The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and orange. The drone recorded the moment for history. "Survival period complete," it announced. "Subject Ethan Cole has fulfilled all requirements of trial by environment. Under Article 7, Section 3 of the Founding Protocols, all charges against the accused are hereby dismissed." Ethan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. It was over. He was free, but Zinthal was not finished. "You have exposed a flaw in our system," the High Arbiter admitted. "The trial by environment was created as an alternative to execution. It was never meant to be survivable. Yet you have proven that our understanding of danger, of threat, of death itself may be incomplete." "Your tribunal judged us without knowing us," Ethan replied. "You saw primitives who had just discovered faster-than-light travel. You saw a species barely out of its cave. But you did not see what made us who we are. And what is that?" Ethan gestured at the forest around them, at the mountains in the distance, at the sun setting over a world that had nearly killed him 12 times in the past 10 days. "This, all of this. Every storm we weathered, every predator we faced, every winter we survived, and every summer we endured. Earth did not try to destroy us. Earth raised us. Earth taught us that life is not meant to be easy. Life is meant to be fought for." Zinthal considered this for a long moment. Around them, the Valkyrie soldiers stood motionless, listening to a conversation that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. "The Tribunal will convene to discuss revision of our protocols," Zinthal finally said. "Newly contacted species should not be punished for honest mistakes. And perhaps we should spend more time learning about civilizations before we judge them. That would be wise. Additionally, the Galactic Council has authorized me to open formal diplomatic relations with your government. Your species has earned the galaxy's attention. Ethan Cole, what you do with that attention is up to you." Ethan extended his hand. A gesture of friendship and agreement that humans had used for thousands of years. Zinthal stared at the hand for several seconds, processing this strange ritual. Then slowly he reached out one of his own limbs and grasped it. "Peace between our peoples," Ethan said. "That is what we want. Just a chance to prove who we really are." 3 weeks later, Ethan returned to the Wandering Hope. The reunion was everything he had hoped it would be. Maria Santos hugged him so hard he thought she might crack his ribs. Kyle Bennett shook his hand and could not stop grinning. The entire crew gathered in the main hall to welcome their commander home. "You're famous, you know," Maria told him later as they stood on the observation deck watching stars drift past. "Every species in the galaxy knows your name. You're the human who survived a Deathworld. I survived Earth, Ethan corrected her. There's nothing special about that. Billions of humans do it every day. That's exactly what makes it special. They thought our world was a death trap. They thought we were lucky to be alive at all. Instead, you showed them that we're not survivors despite our planet. We're survivors because of it. Ethan nodded, thinking about all the challenges that still lay ahead. Humanity would need to prove itself again and again. There would be skeptics and enemies, and those who feared what a Deathworld species might do with galactic power. But they had taken the first step. They had shown the universe that humans were not primitives to be dismissed or threats to be eliminated. They were something new, something the galaxy had never encountered before. They were children of Earth. They were forged in fire and ice. In struggle and triumph, in millions of years of fighting to survive, and now they were ready to take their place among the stars, far away. On Judgment Station, Piptal completed the first draft of his scholarly paper on human resilience. It would eventually become required reading for every species that hoped to understand the strange, stubborn, impossibly durable beings from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. The paper's final. Paragraph read simply, "Do not underestimate humans. They were sentenced to death by their own planet. They responded by conquering it. What else might they conquer given the chance?" It was a question the galaxy would spend centuries trying to answer. And somewhere in the void between stars, the colony ship Wandering Hope continued its journey, carrying humanity's hopes and dreams toward a future that was suddenly brighter than anyone had dared to imagine. Ethan Cole stood at the helm. Watching the universe unfold before him, he was home. Even among the stars, he would always be home.